Basically, I'm on this planning for the unexpected argument. I think the expectation influence probability ideas can actually help us with some of the really big problems that we're facing. That's why I'm interested in it. And black swans, the rare, high impact, allegedly unpredictable events that we've seen, like the financial crisis, if you like, as an example, are really where my interest in the subject is coming from. So let's put in a few of those just to get the story going. The strange thing is, you know, I learned back in when I was a student quite a long time ago. I remember hearing about black swans in scientific methods. It's interesting how they've made it such a characteristic, particularly with the financial crisis. The language has changed. Now, planning for the unexpected. Now, of course, we have amongst us somebody who has a very, very, very strange mind all over the place. These are just some of his ideas put together in a montage on the slide. And those you know him will know that a home dodo cloning kit, for instance, is just the basic thing we all have really at home. And all the rest of it, a world in which people's status is determined by the colours they can see. It's obviously another natural sort of view of the world. There's wonderful ideas, all this stuff, unexpected stuff. Planning for the unexpected, though, is what our topic's about. The book which really got me, as I said, was one of our Thursdays is Missing. That's the book which I think, you know, kind of, I've been following all the others, all of these and lots of others, weird ideas, all of them, but a particular weird idea that inspired me, okay? And as I've said, that's where expectation influence probability to me came from as an idea. Now, I think Jasper's defined what expectation influence probability is very well. Roland has demonstrated it. As I said, this is one of the two moments of truth I've had in the last 10 years, the other one being tied up with Nassim Taleb's work around anti-fragility. In fact, some of you know my interests. Prediction has always been a problem, and it's funny that we don't talk about some of the issues about prediction, it seems to me, inside the society. Taleb says that in complex nonlinear systems, it's not surprising because some things are fundamentally unpredictable, of course. But we all know that anyway, whenever we're working with prediction, we've got problems of human bias in the process. Partly, Roland demonstrated that. Now, one aspect of this, it seems to me, is that there is a trade-off between the precision of prediction and the accuracy of prediction. Okay? And the classics, of course, if we look at the Oracle of Delphi, down there, and Notre Dame, they were often proved right in their predictions because actually they weren't very precise. They were kind of vague predictions. And what we've seen, of course, in the modern world is an attempt to move to very, very precise prediction with a consequence that associated with that we don't get much accuracy. And obviously the value in this process would come as we get both accuracy of prediction and precision of prediction up. So we've got these two parameters that we're talking about. Okay. Now, we also know that prediction is failing. We're seeing more and more examples of prediction is failing in everyday life. Risk analysis, failures of risk analysis. We keep getting hit by risks which are not actually predicted out of the risk analysis. Black swans, these rare high impact events like the financial crisis. The whole concept of bubbles, where basically working out when to get into it and when to get out of it in any market, whether we're buying property in Dubai or we're dealing with, again, reflective of world economic conditions. Now, it seems to me that the argument about these three things has been about the impossibility of predicting them. And it's a bit like the rabbit stuck in the headlights. We just don't know how to deal with those situations. We don't know what to do with those situations. The business community, and to some extent the profession, have reflected that inability to respond. It also seems to me that there's a rather interesting, not very quoted theorem by Eli Goldratt. I don't know if anyone remembers Goldratt. Goldratt was the guy that wrote a book called The Goal, which was popular in the 1980s, a novel about Goldratt and Cox, a novel about a man who was running a factory which was slowly going bankrupt, but he couldn't work out why. His marriage was failing, everything was going wrong, until he bumps into his physics professor at the airport and he observes the Boy Scouts walking through the forest and he sees the answer. Okay? One of the other things Goldratt wrote was the theorem of disappearing clouds. And the theorem of disappearing clouds was basically the idea that whenever we come up against something we can't solve, it tells us that we formulated it wrongly as a problem. Okay? And I find that an interesting concept. So looking at the black swans, looking at the bubbles, looking at the phase of risk analysis, looking at our inability to predict, it seems to me that probably the most likely thing that's going on is we're not on the right page. We're not formulating it right. And there's some evidence of that, of course. We know that the models used in some of these predictions, business prediction in particular, are appalling. Okay? And no wonder they don't work. Now, there's other things to say as well. It's fairly obvious that prediction is only going to be meaningful and useful when we've got high precision and high accuracy. It's also obvious that we need it to be well-founded. We need an underlying theory, a model. And it only going to work when we have realistic models, when we've got parameterizing data for those models, and where, like experimental conditions, we can keep everything else constant. But we've had incredible abuses of prediction. And it's quite interesting that we don't sort of look at, say, certifying predictions in some way, particularly on accuracy and prediction. And, sorry, and precision, accuracy and precision. Okay. Now, what else can we say? Well, there are also, just taking this to its logical conclusion and connecting with expectation influence probability, there are very special circumstances when people are involved, people's actions are involved in relation to prediction. And in particular, we have a feedback loop going on in those circumstances. And that's where expectation influence probability comes in. And the feedback loop that appears in the book is a rather strange feedback loop. It's a feedback loop which is about an asteroid, I think, hitting the Earth, which becomes more likely to happen because people believe it's going to happen. Right, now, maybe that one, we can't quite work out how the feedback loop would work. And yet, we do know that a lot of things become more likely, or indeed less likely, when people think they're going to happen. So the idea is brilliant. Okay? So just a few little examples. Risk management, for instance. Now, in a risk management analysis, what do? We believe in the occurrence of a specific hazard, so we put in safeguards to reduce the likelihood or the impact, to mitigate, to deal with contingency, so we reduce the probability of the specific hazard being realised. Inverse in Jasper's language, an inverse expectation influence probability event. Obviously, as the probability of the specific hazard actually goes up or down, the same thing happens to the belief. So there's a link that way through. This is a simple causal loop diagram. This is the language of cross-system thinking, and it's an extremely useful and powerful language because it represents the closed loop of causality in the system. Now, obviously, we could use this to build in more complicated phenomena, and I'm not going to try and do that today. I'll just illustrate a few more. This one, incidentally, is the balancing loop. That's what the B is doing there. It's balancing because as the belief goes up, we take action, so we have an opposite effect. The O is for opposite, or the probability of the hazard, we reduce it. As the probability of the hazard comes down, the belief goes down by and large, so we have a same direction. And what that thing is going to do is it's not going to asymptote off, it's going to stabilise. Okay? As long as we can spot the risk, which we can't with black swans, we'll come back to that. So this one is the opposite of that. This is the beginning of a bubble, if you like, the classic bubble. We believe in value growth, which therefore means it's likely we will have value growth because everyone else wants to get into the market with us, so we have a same direction relationship. As the probability of value growth goes up, the belief in value growth goes up. So this is a reinforcing loop. This is going to be a vicious or a virtuous circle until something else happens. Another mechanism, other variables taking place around this loop in a second order loop. I'm not going to draw that for you. And here's another one. This is the basic psychology, basically, of what's going on here. We have the belief in occurrence, which means we're either going to make it more likely or less likely for something to occur, and that in turn will make it more likely or less likely for us to believe in it. So the general model would look like this, okay? And then we can build other mechanisms around it. Of course, black swans are like this. If we start with a black swan, we don't believe in it at all. We start from a zero position. As our belief goes up, the probability of occurrence hopefully will come down. if we catch it early enough. And as the probability comes down, the belief in it goes down. So again, there should be a balancing one if we can get into this. Now, in general terms, I think it could be said that all human prediction involves humans, because it's human prediction, who are influenced by beliefs, just as Roland has demonstrated to you, and as Jasper has in fact talked about. All prediction is influenced by a human feedback loop, and the big question for us is, can we make that more visible? Okay. And we've got this danger of vicious and virtuous circles taking place. In reality, we get much more complex diagrams. There'll be loops around loops around loops in terms of what's going on. These systems get more complex and start getting very self-determining behaviours. They may stabilise or they may asymptote. There's a whole set of theory about Magnus systems thinking, which is very, very big. But where do we intervene if we don't like what's happening? Donna Meadows did a lot of work on this, tied up with sustainability and climate change. And she picked out 12 ways we can intervene in these systems if we want to intervene, starting from, if you like, the most minor at the top here, number 12, where we just play around with some of the numbers, perhaps the magnitude of effects, working through to fundamental paradigm shifts at the bottom of this hierarchy. Now, it's quite interesting to think about the world as made up of these causal loops, and to think about intervening in these causal loops and what these sensible interventions would be. And I'm not sure that the interventions we're seeing are anything like the sensible ones. So I don't want to look at it from that point of view. Donna Meadows' work is very much worth having a look at. So I won't say more about that here. I'll just move on to the debate with time. Now, for me, black swans are rare, high-impact, unpredictable events, with the unpredictable being put in inverted commas. My view, I think, like a number of statisticians, has been that they're not really unpredictable. It's just a question of the rigour of the model and the basis of the model. And depends how you view that. There's currently little theory on black swans. If you actually do a literature review on black swans, there's a lot of description. There's actually quite a lot about the historical analysis in relation to them, but there's not very much theory accounting for black swans, it seems to me. Some, but not a lot. I believe that we're talking about an extreme case of expectation influence probability, a boundary condition. Extreme in the sense there is no expectation. Okay? So it's on the edge of a three-dimensional picture, if you like. So, even though black swans are by definition not expected, can we come up with a unified theory? And I believe that this is a question of a domain of vision. Any one of us, or us as collectively as a society or as an institution, have lines of visibility. Some things are inside visibility and are close and we believe in them, and some things are far off. And we all know in reality that every black swan that's been described, somebody knew about and expected. Very often, they discarded them. So 9/11 perhaps is a good example. The American intelligence services picked up on 9/11 but discarded it because it couldn't qualify the data compared to all the other incidents that were on the horizon. The 10th man idea is quite interesting because my line of vision includes a number of weird people out there who also have weird ideas, and if we use my line of vision to help identify other lines of vision, we can expand what we can see as a society. So I like the 10th man concept here. Now, with this view, this mindset, it seems to me the world divides up in a 2x2 matrix. We've got the things we can see and the things we can't see, and the things that are realised and the things that are not realised. And if we look at the world, by and large, we've been using risk analysis and thinking about risk and hazard for the things which are inside our vision, but largely do not happen. And they don't happen because we're taking good precautionary measures in our risk analysis, because they are the usual, the routine. They're not the things that always change risk analysis and introduce something that's never happened before. At the opposite extreme, we have the black swans. They're outside our vision and they get realised. They're not black swans unless they are realised. And they're not black swans unless they're outside our vision. Okay? If it doesn't happen and it's outside our vision, we don't know about it. It's a potential black swan, perhaps. If it's inside our vision, and it happens, it's routine, it's operation. Okay? Now, the perceived probability associated with these things is going to change over time as we get information, as our expectations change. So we don't quite know what's going to happen with the perceived probability associated with these events. Could we use this? So the levels of intervention in the system first, what could we do? We could identify potential threats, potential black swans, if we can increase our vision across the system by using scenarios perhaps, by using creativity techniques, by using the 10th man, by using various things in a systematic way. We could predict the occurrence. Well, that's obviously much more troublesome, particularly if we're going to predict with any precision, then we're going to probably have relatively low accuracy. We would be better if we could go further, and we would influence to increase or decrease the probability in the process. And ideally we would limit, we'd make it impossible, we'd prevent, or we'd make happen certain events. Okay? So maybe we've got a bit of the basis of a unified theory here. So we'd make black swans visible earlier, because we recognise that all they are simply events outside our lines of vision. We then use expectation, influence, probability to track them and to intervene in the system with them, and where necessary to prevent them being realised. Of course, by this point they wouldn't be black swans anymore, because we'd actually identified them before the incident had really been realised. Okay, just as that asteroid hitting the Earth, when we know it's there, it's not really a black swan. We know it's happening now. We can see it ahead of it hitting us. We'd need to work on influences in the causal loop diagram, the Dunham-Meadows type ideas where we could intervene in the system. And we need to expect more. We need to be able to open our eyes to be able to see things we can't see at the moment, to bring them into our line of vision. So things, methods like scenario planning, where we would deliberately force diversity and look, or the 10th man concepts, would be really important there. Okay? And we need to be worried about it. One of the big problems with the black swans has been nobody cares, we're just too busy making money. So a concern issue would need to be part of this. So with that sort of approach, we'd be using risk analysis and management for the risk and hazard situations. We'd be using creativity and various early other tools to make the black swans visible earlier, hence stopping them from being black swans. We then use prevention, protection and precautionary principles in the context of them. Now, precautionary principles, we use basic hygiene techniques even though we don't quite know about any particular outbreak that's going to hit us. At the moment it's Ebola, but we would still be using hygiene as a general precautionary principle. So in that sort of way. Just conscious of the time. So what are the key parameters here? The rate and magnitude with which we're going to be hit with black swans. Financial crises are expected. They happen on regular cycles. We didn't expect this one when it happened. We should have. It's always happened before, it will happen again. But we were too busy making money. There are various models, of course, to try and account for them. None of them very good, mainly curve fitting, but the zip distribution is one of those, which would look at the occurrence rates of these things and curve fit to previous black swans. The concept that our environment goes into critical states at various points might be very important here. Whenever we have been making a lot of money, it's a pretty good sign that we're moving into a code red area, a bit like a red flag, warning us of danger, high intensity. So again, there are potentials there about the fact that the black swans are more likely to occur under certain circumstances, which in various mistake-proofing areas would be referred to as red flag conditions. So maybe a code red concept is important here to warn us of danger. We would need to work on the right things, improving risk management, which I think a lot of work has been started on to improve the effectiveness of risk management by opening out the sight of it, the vision of it, and making visible black swans, which I think at the moment we've done very little in, and we've done very little on putting in protection. So all of this would be about developing a black swan management program. Now the big topic, of course, which all this comes within, and I teach this on MBA programs these days, is enterprise risk management. Since the financial crisis will require financial institutions to take risk up to the level of the board. But the problem is, it comes up in silos most of the time and they can't put it together. And the board is very blind to and do not understand the risks involved. It's very obvious if we went back over the financial crisis with all those bad pushed mortgages onto subprime borrowers, that the products that were at the bottom of the pyramid were vulnerable. When they were combined together into products to be sold financially, they were still vulnerable. But apparently the boards of our banks couldn't see that, were not capable, didn't have the vision, didn't have the understanding of what was going on within them to actually fulfil what would look like statutory duties. So I think there's a big issue here about precautionary principles, about visibility, and about all those sorts of areas. Now, do I think that enterprise risk management today is worthwhile? Yes, it's much better than anything we've had before. But I do think it would be enhanced if we had deliberate principles of forcing